What is happening, y'all? I'm Caleb, and to get started today, let me state the obvious. Some choices obviously fall in either the right or wrong or good or bad categories. Stealing and cheating are undoubtedly not good things. Murder is clearly wrong, but you already know that a lot of things, most things, aren't so simple. For example, lying. Okay, flat out, this is wrong, but don't we try to justify it saying things like, hold on, time out, this is a special circumstance. Like, say you have a friend who would be extremely hurt if you were honest about your opinion of their style. I mean, that can't turn out good for anyone. Wouldn't it just be better to lie and say you like the outfit? Or maybe you forgot to do your homework, but it would be easier to make up a story about why you forgot it than to tell the truth. How about boundaries when it comes to things like sex? Maybe you've heard church people talk about how sex was made to happen in marriage, but isn't it true we'd like to kind of treat physical stuff as if it was on a sliding scale? I mean, there's a whole range of things before sex, so what about kissing? Is it right or wrong? And how far can I go before what seems okay turns into what's wrong? Are you really supposed to not do anything? I mean, like anything until marriage? Or is everything okay before marriage? How do you know? Okay, let's get really real now. What about your friends? We've all got that one friend who makes bad decisions, but they're not a bad person. So what do you do with that? Maybe they don't pressure you to join them, but over time, some of their language, their habits, and their decisions rub off on you. But are you really supposed to just dump a friend? And aren't Jesus followers supposed to basically be friends with everybody? What are you supposed to do with a good person who isn't necessarily good for you? Maybe nowhere seems more gray than what you post. You know by now what to post to get a few or a lot, like a lot, more likes. And after all, everyone does it. But the things that get more likes often toe the line of what's appropriate, whether it comes at the expense of your reputation or someone else's. They're the kind of posts that just may be a little awkward or straight up haunt you at your first job interview. So, should your profile be full of what gets the biggest response? After all, isn't that kind of the point of posting in the first place? You could probably think of a million scenarios just like these, where the situation isn't as easy as saying, oh, this is right, or that's wrong. Every day, we encounter situations that fall somewhere in between. Situations won't always have a clear, this is good and that is bad answer. So the question is, how do you make decisions when the answer isn't obvious? There's a word that summarizes the answer to all of those questions, and that word is wisdom. Now, there are a few ways to explain wisdom, but here's a simple way to think of it. Wisdom helps us avoid foolish decisions. And that's what this series is all about. Wisdom is really what stands in the gap between amateur and pro thinking, between rookie mistakes and decisions you'll one day be proud of. Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at some big ideas from the book of Proverbs. If you're not familiar with the Bible, Proverbs is a collection of thoughts, sayings, instructions about life, and other insights that are full of wisdom. Much of Proverbs was written by someone named Solomon. That's fun to say. Solomon, who was a king of ancient Israel. At the time, Solomon was considered one of the wisest people in history. As we'll talk about over the next few weeks, Proverbs is a great place to go when you don't know what to do. For example, check out this verse. Hold on. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Trust God. Trust the one who made everything, including you, who knows everything, and who knows how everything works. Plus, as Jesus made clear, God is a God who absolutely loves you, which means God can be trusted. So, trust God. Trust God's understanding, and then don't rely on your own understanding. I'll admit that this feels a little weird. You should trust yourself, right? We should all go with what our gut is telling us, right? Okay, mostly yes. If you're in a dangerous situation and your gut tells you to run or yell for help, go ahead and do that. But at the same time, we all know times we made decisions that were really awful. Sometimes we need more than just our gut instinct. Imagine that your younger sibling wanted to argue with you about what happens at the end of Stranger Things, but they've only seen the trailer. You've watched the entire show and they've seen 2 minutes of it. I don't have to tell you this, but you know that you'll have a better understanding of how the show ends because you've seen the whole thing. The way God sees our lives works in a similar way. Think of it like this. All right, here we go. Y'all can see that? Okay. Think of a situation in your life. For example, you found a piece of leftover pizza in your fridge that has been there for quite a few days. You're trying to decide whether or not it's still okay to eat. That situation is represented by this push pin. Go with me for a second. Maybe you're 11 and you've never been in this situation before. It's pizza and you don't see any mold, so what could it hurt? You eat it and don't feel so good the next day. Here we go. Maybe you're a senior and you've been in this situation like 3 times. So that's 1, 2, 3. You've been in this situation 3 times and you've seen it happen 3 other times. So that's 1, 2, 3. We'll go up here. Okay, you've seen it happen another 3 times, and at least twice someone's gotten sick from eating the pizza. So that's here and here. Cool? Or maybe you're an adult and you've been in this situation like 8 times and you've seen it happen to other people 12 times. So that's like, we're not gonna do the full 20 because I apparently can't do push pins well, but you can now name multiple occasions from your life and others where eating something old kind of didn't end up well. But if you're God, you've been around since forever. You have literally seen this situation happen every time it has ever happened, and you created everyone in the situation. We only know what we know. In other words, we can only know what we've experienced, which means that someone who's older than us, who has experienced more of the world, naturally sees more of the situation than we do. God has a greater perspective than us. Okay, so let's continue to break down this verse. Trust God and don't only rely on your own understanding. And then in all of your ways, submit to God. Submit is a strange word. Other translations use the word acknowledge, but the big idea is to invite God to be involved in and in charge of every part of your life. It's not just a once a week thing. You can choose to trust God with all of your life. And if you do choose to entrust your life to God, God will make your paths straight. Another translation says it this way, and He will show you which path to take. Listen, if you're human, and I hope you are, your perspective is limited. But Solomon is saying that when we trust God with our lives, God will help us see the next step on a better path forward. And following that path now is the best way to avoid making decisions that could negatively impact our future. Trusting God is the wisest thing you can do. Think of it this way. Trusting God is a pro move. Short and sweet, let's say it again. Trusting God is a pro move. Following God's wisdom in the gray areas of our life today will be something we'll never regret. As we've seen, life doesn't always present clear-cut choices. Should you stay with your significant other who isn't bad for you, they just aren't good for you either? Should you post just for likes or be a little more intentional with your content? What's the best way to spend your time? The answers to questions like these are found by getting and using wisdom. It means to start practicing and thus developing pro thinking now so that you can live like a pro later. Solomon provides some great starting points for finding wisdom and avoiding unnecessary problems on your path. He says to trust God, Seek out God's wisdom for your situation and get God involved on your journey. But how do you actually do that? First, check out the Bible. Like we said earlier, Proverbs is a great place to start gaining wisdom and seeing what God has to say. Another great place to start reading are the accounts of Jesus' life on earth. Jesus' life is documented by Jesus' followers in books called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the 4 accounts of Jesus' life. You probably know this, but Jesus had a lot to say about experiencing life to the fullest, to living a life free of regret. You could easily park in Proverbs and the Gospels and stockpile wisdom for your future. Next, show up to your small group. And by show up, I mean, yes, actually be there. But even more than that, choose to be dialed in. Choose to participate. Choose to listen and ask questions. Choose to be trustworthy as well as vulnerable with your group. Just having a different perspective can help you see things you couldn't see on your own. And everyone in your group has lived a life that's different from yours. So talk to them. Share what's going on. Tell them about the decisions you're facing. I bet you have a lot of wisdom waiting right there. And finally, talk with your small group leader or another trusted older and wiser adult. Remember, perspective is key, and this person has lived a different life and lived it longer than you. Chances are there are people in this room who would be glad to listen and offer their insights on what you're facing. Remember this, trusting God is a pro move. Everything happening in your life today will be a part of your story. So, what kind of story do you want your life to tell? If you want to tell a pro one, that doesn't happen overnight. Pro tip, it starts by leaning into wisdom today. As we wrap up, there are 2 questions I want you to think about. What would happen if you don't do this? What if you don't do those things, but instead lean on your own understanding and make decisions with only your own perspective? What could go wrong? What could go right? What could you miss out on? But also consider, what if you did this? What if every time you had a decision to make, you actively trusted God, you looked at Scripture, and ran decisions by your small group and someone older in your life? What would your future look like if you made tons of wise decisions now because you decided to seek wisdom today? What if this is a great way to see God working in your life now and in the future? As a teenager, the choice is entirely up to you, but you owe it to yourself to at least think about how you make decisions and whether or not trusting God is a pro move.